And welcome. This is Peter Winick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage, and you're joining us on our podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is Kevin W. McCarthy. Kevin's a thought leader who is also the Chief Leadership Officer of On Purpose Partners. His first book was The On Purpose Person, and he's stayed with that theme for a long time. His books include Making Your Life Make Sense. That was published in 92, then came out again in 09. The On Purpose Business Person, Doing More of What You Do Best, More Profitably. And then his latest book is The Chief Leadership Officer, Increasing Wealth So Everyone Profits. So Kevin's been at this a long, long time. And what I love about Kevin is several things, but this incredible focus on the purpose slice of the world in terms of content. And he's done lots and lots of interesting and creative things to get it out into the world. So welcome, Kevin. Thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Peter. It's great to be with you.
So given that you, like myself, have a couple of gray hairs, right?
Yes.
Metaphorically speaking, give me a sense of, from 92 until now, from your first book until currently, what's changing in terms of, it used to be, I think, more of a playbook of when you release a book, do these 7 things, and you're pretty much not guaranteed, but certain outcomes are pretty comfortable. How does that compare to the world of today? Launching thought leadership, a book, getting your message out.
Sure. Yeah, it's a remarkable change in terms of just the technologies that are available to us, as well as, in 1992, when the On Purpose Person first came out, and of course, one of the things, if I can just sort of lay the background against it, is when I was talking about purpose in the late 80s and then early 90s, and then the On Purpose Person came out in 1992, nobody was talking about purpose. So I was truly pioneering a field, or maybe there were a handful of people.
It was probably been as popular as gluten-free in the early 90s, right?
Correct.
So I think
great example. That's a great example. I'm going to steal that. Anyway, what and part of it too is, really the internet was, I guess it was around, but it was like, email. I think we might have had a website. Just all of those things are there. And now, to some extent, the conversation about purpose, which I'm believing that I'm really one of the key pioneers of that, about purpose. I'm truly the thought leader on purpose. That what's happened is that conversation has now come around to where people are talking about their purpose. And unfortunately, they're confused about it because now there's so much clutter around it, in my opinion. And so now I have shifted from pioneering to taking something that is ubiquitous almost in many of the coaches, and trying to say to them, now we're trying to correct it, you don't want a sense of your purpose. Your purpose isn't what you do, it's who you are. It's trying to actually get the language and the concepts more appropriately into people's lives, thoughts, and thinking.
So let's talk about, the clutter, because I think that's a great way to put it, because the good news, bad news was in the ancient days of the 90s, there was less stuff getting out. It was, if you had a great concept, you're pretty limited in how you can get that out to, other than your friends, your colleagues, sort of your world, or get published in a traditional way and hope that worked. So that was good. But today the downside is, if everybody is a media outlet, if everybody is a publisher, there's a lot of noise there. So I agree with you. If I wouldn't even attempt to Google it, but already Google, sort of purpose, I would imagine I can spend days and days and days sifting through that. And how do I separate the wheat from the chaff? Because that's really the challenge now, because just because everybody can publish doesn't mean they should.
That's correct. I used to have maybe 5 people I knew that were authors. Now I probably know 150 or 300 or something. It's just like everybody I know is an author now. And again, a part of going back to my history is I was actually published. That's, I had a publisher and they wanted the book and they did all the things. And I did a royalty arrangement. Now, I basically don't even want to bother with a publisher because I know the game. And, unless your name is John Grisham or James Patterson or something, unless you have a huge national following already where they want your story, they just don't want my story. It's hard for me. And I've sold, 300,000 copies more, actually probably more than that. I just don't track the numbers all that well. But so I'm really, truly a best-selling author.
I want to jump on a couple of things that you said there. So one is you've sold 300,000 or plus units. That's astronomical in this market. The average business book sells less than 2,000 copies. So, we're talking to sort of a super elite 1%er in terms of 300,000. That being said, even you at your level of success from a publishing perspective are saying, geez, I'm not John Grisham. The chicken and the egg problem is, and I see this more often when folks are attempting to go the traditional publishing route, is they're not only looking at the content, but they're looking at your platform and your network. So there is an opportunity in this market to build your own network and your own followership and all that. It takes a lot of hard work, takes a lot of focus, takes a lot of effort, and then use that as a distribution channel. So how would you respond to that?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think at some level, I mean, here's the little dirty secret about the publishing world, at least from my point of view. And that is they're doing exactly what you're describing. Is it's like a speakers bureau at some level. They want they want to book people on, or they want to engage people in the speakers bureau where there's already a demand, and all they're doing is a conduit for it. So unless you already have a demand, you're not going to get the publishing deal or the speaker bureau gig or all of those sorts of things.
So where do I start though? If I'm you 15 years ago, if I'm Kevin minus 15 and I'm starting to get into the space and I have some really good, so let's just make sure that we agree. You've got to have great content. There's no short circuiting that. There's no easy ways around that. People are too smart. I think many people try to short circuit that. But let's assume you've got something thoughtful, but you're totally a stranger or it's totally foreign to you when it comes to building followership and all that. Where would you suggest I start? What's the first thing I should do?
Well, the first thing I think is you have to check your humility.
Okay.
Because you're sitting there, you have this big message in your heart, and you want to change the world and all of that, and then
Yeah.
there's I think it was Solomon said, "Never despise the day of small beginnings." And so what you have to do is, first of all, clarify your message, whether that's writing a speech, writing a book, writing an outline, creating a PowerPoint. You've got to get something out there, and then you've got to go test it.
Well, let me pause there again. There's so much wisdom coming out pretty fast here. So the forcing mechanism of writing a speech, a book, whatever, part of it forces you to think through how to articulate to others all that you are passionate about, right? In a way that's logical and digestible by someone else, not just, oozing out of your pores. Would you concur?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, one of the things I talk about is from a writing point of view, whether you're writing a book or a speech or whatever it may be, is most of us write what we want to say, not what people want to hear.
Right.
And so first I tell people, write down what you want to say, and then almost like turn the piece of paper around and say, if I was to receive this, or go talk to your wife, or go talk to your best friend, or go talk to somebody and say, does this make sense to you? And they're going to go, well, that sounds good to you, but I don't really get what you're talking about. And so at some level, it's this ability from a marketing point of view, which is to say, and it's really just basic good communication. How do I have it so that when I convey this, somebody actually wants to listen to it?
And I would take that one further, Kevin, and say it's not just somebody. You have to be crafting that message and that content to specific avatars or profiles, right?
Absolutely. The personas, having that persona is really important. I mean, again, that's sort of, I guess, but that's a great point that you're bringing up, Peter, because absolutely, I mean, whenever I say somebody, I was implied in that was that you have a persona that you have a message, who it applies to. You're working hard to think about what's going on in their life. And chances are, this is where the purpose piece comes in. Chances are, at some level, it's something that you have fought in your own life. I mean, I think that
Yep.
all of us are crusaders so that other people don't have to experience what we experienced, or we don't want them to have to experience our pain at the level of depth that we have gone through it.
Yep. No, totally. So let me ask you from your experience, how have you experimented with and how have the personas that you serve evolved or changed over time?
Well, it's really been interesting because, again, with On Purpose, talking about your purpose in life is such a huge message. I mean, everybody has a purpose in life, okay? Now, whether they want to know it or not. So where I have fallen out on it, on the personal side, let's just leave the business part because that gets even more complicated when you're talking about the business side or the personal side. On the personal side, what I have found is when people have these moments of crisis, these moments of doubt, or these moments of joy, the birth of a child, a marriage,
Yeah.
these life events occur, and they start to reflect and say, well, who am I, and what does this mean to me, and or something in my life has to change. But there's this internal conversation where they sit there and say, I'm not happy with my life, or I hate my life, or and I don't know who I am. It's all of these conversations that are going on inside of somebody that, we're quick, we who are fixers, so to speak, we're quick to say, well, here, do this, 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 but we haven't really asked permission and then asked questions of the person to draw out. We're quick to throw answers, but we have to earn our way into their heart and mind.
Okay.
And when we earn their way into their heart and mind, now we have an opportunity to walk alongside of them and help them, because if we don't identify with them, they're not going to identify with us. But first we have to identify ourselves. So that's where the purpose piece is in. If you don't know who you are and you're trying to write a message.
No, but so where I was trying to go is, and I agree with you on the purpose piece, but you have a message, and just from an efficiency perspective, you want to get it out to these personas who you believe for whatever reason it will resonate with most, number one. And number two, there's a business application side to this where you can't waste resources getting your message out to folks that aren't good candidates for you from the business side, unless that's a small piece of what you're doing for the betterment of the universe or something like that. Where I was going is, how do you find those personas where it resonates with them at an emotional level, at an intellectual level, and this is the big end, it's good for you as the creator from a business perspective.
Yeah, well, I mean, the big difference between 1992 and today is now you can go on LinkedIn, you can go on Facebook, you can go on Twitter, you can look at groups. People are in association. And one of the things I occasionally do some sales training, and I always tell people, if you're going to be in sales, particularly independent salespeople, you want to have access, affinity, and credibility. And so you have to look at it and say, where do I have credibility because I share those common experiences? Where do I have access? In other words, if I'm a psychologist and I've written a book on the psychology of something that's going on, my tribe is probably other psychologists, but at some level, it's their patients you're trying to get to. So I have access to those psychologists who might recommend my book, and I have credibility with them because I'm one of them. So it's and then I join the Association of Psychologists or whatever it may be.
Yeah, right.
You see what I'm saying? So it's always looking at access, affinity, and credibility. And when you have those, whether you're selling something, which is a product, or you're selling yourself and your message, it's still the same issues.
I want to take that a step further. So let's say whatever that group is. The beautiful thing about the world that we live in today of the internet, people self-select and self-identify, right? If it's odd that a plumber would be in the group of psychologists, right? It's just not going to happen. So you're gonna find the right people there. I think the other piece is just sort of an etiquette piece. If it's your first time joining one of those groups or participating or whatever, and you sort of come bursting into the room, if you will, the virtual room, sell, the perception of you is jerk, 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 jerk. So I think it's critical to understand the etiquette. Sometimes people miss that online, is find the right group, contribute, be generous, be thoughtful, add comments to things, etc. Don't just come in there and, hey, look at me, look at me, look at me. People don't, that's not received pretty well.
100% agree.
Yeah.
That's why I was saying earlier, you have to have permission.
Yeah.
You have to ask for permission.
You have to earn it.
Can I contribute? Yeah, and you can earn it. But a lot of that is by asking questions and at some level sharing opinions and giving some things. But I mean, again, this is one of the things my wife and I always talk about is you don't want to should on people. If somebody wants your advice, you ask, do you really want my advice? And if that's the case, then okay, I'll tell you what you want to do, type of thing. But to walk up to somebody and say, well, you should do this and you should do that and you should do that. And I'm like, take your should and take it somewhere else.
Exactly. Okay, so you can find and build your tribe. What are something that you've been doing, let's say in the last, I don't know, year to 3, that's sort of different or new, that's yielding some interesting results in terms of getting the message out and spreading the content and the thought leadership?
Yeah, well, I mean, part of my big crusade is I want to eradicate meaninglessness from the planet. And the way I do that is the cure for that is purpose. And that means you understand it, you have it, and you're able to give it expression. Okay. So the tool that I've developed, we have a website that's called onpurpose.me, and people can go there and they can find their 2-word purpose statement in a matter of 3 minutes. And then we have a drip campaign that comes behind it, an educational drip campaign with a little bit of upsells. And we're building out. So this is still very, very young in terms of its development. We actually have the tool that I could use in speaking engagements where I could have 100, 300, 500, 1,000 people in a room, and I could actually have everybody walk out of that room with their purpose statement. So we had a group version of it, but we didn't have a retail version of it. So now the retail version's out there, and part of what I'm trying to do is at some level help coaches, trainers, speakers, and so on and so forth who want to talk about purpose. At some level, I'm seeing myself not necessarily as the thought leader, but almost the thought leader of thought leaders, where I'm trying to say to them, look, if you want to introduce purpose into your program, whether you're a corporate trainer, an independent trainer, member of the National Speakers Association, but you want to talk about purpose, let me give you a module that you can plug into that is 30 years in the making. It's proven, it works, and there's a whole backup system behind that. And as they would put people through that system, in many ways, I'm doing a little training for them, but they're also then training. My payback is I get a little bit of money on the front end, and I also now have an opportunity for those people to opt into a more supportive understanding of purpose. So it's kind of like people, a trainer or speaker, author could go out there and introduce this in their talk, but now it's like, okay, most people are not like I am. I'm sort of a freak of nature in the sense of purpose when it comes to purpose and on purpose.
Yep.
I mean, how do you spend 30 years of your life looking at it? It's kind of weird.
Yeah, right.
And so where a lot of people I find, are talking about purpose, and I just sort of cringe whenever I hear it. It's like, oh my gosh, I feel like Simon Cowell sometimes sitting on American Idol, listening to people off tune or not singing it right, or they're not singing the right song. And so they start off on the wrong note because purpose is that first note. They start off on the wrong note, and then everything after that is diminished.
I was saying, because that word, when you started in this space a long time ago, it was really clear as to what you meant, and because it's sort of become, I don't want to say a buzzword, but it's become a thing. I think if you were to stop 10 people on the street and say, well, define purpose, you might get 11 definitions. So we can't all be talking about the same thing if it doesn't actually mean the same thing. So getting that
Right.
clarity around, when I say purpose, this is what I mean. Otherwise, it's a garbly conversation, Tower of Babel type situation.
Yeah, and what's really interesting about it is, I mean, the real, I'll give a real clear example of this. In 2000, Pastor Rick Warren came out with a book, The Purpose-Driven Life. Sounds great. Now I hear purpose-driven.
Right.
But theologically, if you really get down to it, if you want to talk to theology, he's a pastor.
Yep.
We are called, we are not driven. So in fact, our job is to answer the call that is on our heart, whether you're a person of faith or not. There's something in your heart and you want to answer that call. But if you're driven, a driven person is usually not considered to be a positive thing, because they will run over people. The very people that you're attempting to help, you're running over them. So it actually is a twist of the words. And that was, I'm going to almost say, whenever he released that book, that was when the confusion, the good news, the bad news. The good news was people started to talk about purpose. The bad news is they had it all bass-ackwards.
Yeah, right. Cool. So as we start to going to start to wind down here, give us maybe one thing to absolutely never do as a budding thought leader, or even as a successful thought leader looking to take it to the next level, and one thing that they might consider adding into their repertoire.
Never to do. That's an interesting question, I think.
And I asked your advice, so you're not shitting on me. So.
Yeah. I think one is recognize that you're an expert in your field, but you're a goofball in other things.
Right. So right.
It goes back to the humility issue. Just because you're good in one thing, don't assume you're good in everything.
That's important, though. I dig that. I buy that. So know the scope of your expertise, right? Or the span, right?
And the second part of the question is, what should they be doing, so to speak? I think recognize that you can become so much of a technician about what's going on that you forget that there's a business that's alongside of it. And to your point, if you're going to be a thought leader, you also better be a leader of those thoughts and the leader of that business. So it's thought leadership is part of it, business leadership is another part of it, and then frankly leadership of yourself and others, leading that message, because at some level, if you're going to, every message needs a leader.
Right.
And so, and it's, we can all sit there and say, this was part of the humility problem I had, the downside of the humility. At the beginning of my message, I kept saying, it's about the message, it's not about me. And that killed it for me.
Right.
Because people were looking for somebody. They were looking for a leader. They were looking for that. And I was too humble, too quiet, too reserved. I kept saying, no, it's not about me. It's about the message. It's about the message. It's about the message.
Love it. Well, thank you so much. I mean, I think that oftentimes when folks come on and start to share things, they, some of the things they say early in the show where they just sort of throw them out there, they discount the amount of wisdom that's in there because you've been doing it so long and it's sort of second nature to you. And when you sort of rattled out, and I think I've sold 300,000 books. Folks, there's a lot to learn from Kevin, and he's quite humble, and he's done it the right way, and he's done it, slowly but surely, getting it out there. And the other compliment I'll give you, Kevin, is you haven't wavered. You haven't tried to be the jack of all trades. You're the purpose guy. And I think that's a really important piece as it relates to platform and all that, is staying on point, because there's so much noise out there. Is I don't want to have to decode Kevin's the purpose guy on Tuesdays, but to this guy on Thursdays. And sometimes he does, process reengineering if you need help with that. So anyway, thank you for sharing everything and being transparent and sharing with us some of your successes and a couple of skinned knees along the way.
Well, thank you, Peter. And and frankly, I appreciate what you're doing for all of us out there who are our thought leaders or attempting to be thought leaders, because you're putting out some great information. I mean, I love your videos and your podcasts. So keep up the good work. I mean, you have a great service.
I appreciate that. I do all my own stunts. I got a paper cut once doing a video, just so you know. Taking one for the Anyway, thanks so much for your time today. I appreciate it. And we're going to talk again soon. Thank you so much. To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.